Hi everyone, thank you very much. My name's John Ennis, founder of Journeys in Design. Very warm welcome on a cold, wet Edinburgh night. I had a quick blether with Mary Mullin here, and I feared a bit of a small crowd, and Mary said, "Do you want quantity or quality?" And I said, well, it looks like we've got both, so thank you very much for coming out. It's a real pleasure to be welcoming you this evening, and this is the 12th of our Twilight Talks about design, inaugurated in 2014, bringing thinkers, curators and makers together with an engaged audience to discuss the role of culture in the landscape of Scotland and beyond. Our talks emerge from the Journeys in Design exhibitions and events. And I hope you had a chance to nip upstairs, or perhaps at a time before, to see our Linen Stories, the current Journey in Design. It's been 2 years in the making, super exciting, and what a stunning space in which to hold an exhibit about flax fibre and linen. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to Dovecot. Something I realised, I've been in Scotland for 30 years, coming originally from Lisburn in Northern Ireland, was that actually we're all migrants. I'd like to say a particular thank you to a migrant from the south, Celia Joycey, director of Dovecot Studios. Just before asking Celia to say a little bit about this wonderful building, thank you so much to the team at Dovecot. Celia personally and her wonderful team have brought the most fantastic, engaging exhibitions. Dovecot is a centre of design thinking as much as it is a place for wonderful exhibitions. I'm very grateful to have been part of the team here for the 5 months we've been here. Celia Joycey.
This is thanks for thanks. So we want to also thank our Linen Stories, Journeys in Design, and John for bringing his energy and connecting all of us. So we believe at Dovecot, we're a tapestry studio, that we can use textiles to connect people, not just with Europe, but with the world. So Dovecot, in its 100 years, has forged connections both through bringing people to Edinburgh and Scotland, but also sending people out. So one of our most interesting sort of emigres was somebody called Archie Brennan, who was best mates with Sean Connery and even beat him to be Mr. Scotland back in the 1950s, but then took weaving to the world and took particularly Scottish tapestry weaving. So he took it to France, he went to Australia, where he set up the Australian Tapestry Workshop funded by Rupert Murdoch's mother. He went to Hawaii, he worked in Papua New Guinea, and then he worked for many years in North America, working with Gloria Ross and bringing her artists, American artists, to Scotland. So we have direct experience of that. We're going to be bringing an exhibition from Italy of Raphael to Dovecot in the summer. But what we're very excited about is looking to future textiles, and it feels linen has the power to connect us in new ways, sustainability, innovative design, and to make Scotland an international draw for design. We certainly know we've got some of the best design colleges, art colleges in the world. So we want to push all of those things through Dovecot, and hopefully we can collaborate with all of you in new ways going forward. But thanks to John, thanks to our speakers, and we look forward to hearing all of your intelligence tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Celia. Fantastic May Morris exhibition, in super contrast to the Grace and Perry exhibition which came before it. Just wonderful opportunities to learn about our design culture. In the past 8 years, Journeys in Design has developed some sort of philosophies, I think, to help define what we'd like to achieve. One we really hold true is that we all stand taller in the world when we can reach out to countries and cultures other than our own. We hope we can achieve that, bringing an internationalism to focus with the considerable Scottish design talent native to this country, and linking to designers elsewhere in the world, and in particular with our Linen Stories to Europe. So I'm particularly honoured to welcome to the stage Ben Macpherson, MSP, Minister for Europe, Migration and International Development, to say a few words. Thank you, Ben. . 'Cause 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 '
Thank you so much, John, and a very good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with you. A number of years ago, when John first launched Our Linen Stories as the MSP for Edinburgh Northern and Leith before I was a minister, I was delighted to be there on the first day. And of course, Leith was a perfect place to begin that journey, somewhere that's been connected to the world in an international way through trade and migration for such a long time, and also one of the most diverse places in Scotland in terms of those who've come here to make Scotland home. And so, as Minister for Europe, Migration and International Development and the local MSP for Edinburgh Northern and Leith, I was delighted to accept tonight's invitation, but also because assisting the Cabinet Secretary for Culture and also the son of a designer, I am fully aware of the importance of design to bringing people together. And in philosophy and in principle, that is what we're thinking about tonight. It's all about connections. Yes, in the past, through the story of linen and other aspects that are demonstrated in the exhibition and will no doubt be discussed this evening, but also our contemporary connections and the ones that we want to build going forward. We face a very challenging time politically, as you all know, and I don't want to get into the politics. That's not why you're here this evening. But in a number of weeks, the challenge of continuing those connections and building those connections is likely to become harder, politically especially. But those people-to-people relationships, those institution-to-institution relationships, those relationships built around the passions we share, like design, will become ever more important. So, as we go into this new year, I think we share something in the room, which is a desire to be more connected, more in touch with the continent that we share, and more internationalist in our outlook. And I really look forward to hearing that discussion, both the insight and the passion this evening. And thank you to John and everyone involved in Dovecot for hosting this event. And I hope you all have an enjoyable evening. And thank you for your own contributions as well. Thank you.
So, down to the meat of the evening. Well wishes from one of our speakers, Emma Bond, who was due to be here but sadly was delayed. Emma is an extraordinary academic from St Andrews University, and she'd been researching in Brazil. Delayed flights and the weather meant she couldn't be with us tonight, but she sends her warm wishes. I was fortunate enough to be a keynote speaker in her conference in June. Emma's brought together very potently at this time university departments, museums, and creative practitioners. Emma's looking at transnational trade, the heritage of transnational trade. So it was a great honour for me to talk about linen and sugar. I'd been to Cuba. I didn't talk about rum, but we had a very interesting conversation around that after that event. How to introduce Mary Mullin. I fear I might be out of time if I had to mention all the extraordinary contributions of this pioneering woman has made to design in Ireland, in the UK, and internationally. To name but three: Chair of the Sir Misha Black Award for Distinguished Services to Design Education, Trustee of the Robin and Lucian Day Foundation, and Secretary General of the International Council of Graphic Design. It's a great privilege to welcome Mary to Edinburgh and to Scotland. I've challenged myself. This is all about object culture at the end of the day. We bond through a joy of object. So this is Mary's. This is a Fulgur coffee pot. I was lucky enough to hear at the Biennale in Ireland, the Linen Biennale in Ireland in 2018, a wonderful talk by Mary. And Mary presented this as an example of design, classic, enduring, not addictive, but certainly appealing. I'd like to introduce Mary Mullin.
Thank you, John. It's a great honour to be here and wonderful to meet you all. Thank you. Now, there's a Scots Gaelic proverb which translates, "We are to learn as long as we live." Those of us who are involved in nurturing design talent are constantly learning. In a world which is continually changing, and cultures are merging and emerging, where technology moves rapidly, this has never been more true. We must embrace the new while treasuring the old. We must nurture our distinctive and diverse cultures, otherwise we'll have nothing left to share. Take Harris Tweed. Today, anyone, anywhere, may observe via the slim screen how to weave this timeless fabric, but the virtual knowledge transmitted will not replace the generations of accumulated skill passed to the weaver who produces the famous cloth. When we overemphasize the promise of digital information economy, we are in danger of missing the physical know-how that binds our society together. Design education, management, and practice has changed almost beyond recognition since the mid-20th century, when design as a career, as we think of it today, took off. The teachings of the Bauhaus, 100 years old last year, were not widely adopted until after World War II. Yet, looking back on some of the schemes which fueled movements and brought about change, as John has asked me to do, this might provide a perspective on what might be apposite for now. And I hope they'll demonstrate how sharing and learning from other countries, as the Minister has said, and cultures need not result in a debased copying, but instead can inspire new ventures and enrich existing ones. These tales may remind us how action, appropriate to time and place, has given opportunity to individuals, changed the course of the economy of a country, and won over skeptical governments. The three I have chosen out of many are Kilkenny Design Workshops in Ireland, the life of Dr. Muriel Gann, and the awards for distinguished services to design education, which were created in honor of Sir Bishop Black, who was the Russian-born first professor of industrial design at the Royal College of Art in London. Now, in 1961, an initiative took place which was to change how the Irish, in government, industry, education and training, learned or related to design. It was the vision of William H. Walsh, then head of the Irish Export Board. Kilkenny Design Workshops was set up as a national centre for excellence in design, which restored to the national ethos a pride and an appreciation in the importance of things man-made. It's difficult now to envisage how, almost 60 years ago, just what a challenge that was. It would have been virtually impossible to find a government in any country that understood how design could help make manufactured goods competitive on a world market, much less commit scarce financial resources to such a project. Even more difficult in Ireland was to convince government ministers that you were going to spend some of that money on the restoration of historic, ruined stables in the middle of the island, and as a location for a modern design research think tank. But drive, ability, political savvy, and enthusiasm succeeded, and the restored buildings won a European Architectural Heritage Award, encouraging Ireland to view and value its architectural heritage in a more constructive way. Now, William Walsh's brilliant concept of marrying the best skills of traditional craft workers, in the case of textiles, native Irish-speaking weavers from Donegal, with the brightest young designers from Scandinavia, or graduates from the Royal College of Art in London, and placing them in inspiring surroundings using indigenous materials, had the expected results and produced something which was different and was to become known as Kilkenny Design. In addition, there were crafts apprenticeship schemes where local school leavers with potential but no place to train worked with master silver and goldsmiths from Berlin, London, and Switzerland. And when they had been nurtured to a point where they had some skill under their hammers, they received scholarships to study abroad. The sons of those first apprentices are now training a third generation of workers in precious metals in Kilkenny. Now, similar schemes were in place for wood, metal, ceramics, and glass, but the primary reason why the skilled craftsmen were there was to produce prototypes for industrial production. One of the early pieces of literature stated that while prototypes are made by hand, the promotion of handicrafts is not the main function of the workshops. The requirements of quantity production is at all times a determining factor. Yet, Kilkenny was one of the founder partners of the Crafts Council of Ireland, and many of its staff were encouraged by William Walsh to contribute to its establishment and growth. Most of all, those of us who worked there were given a legacy of commitment to excellence and quality, which in turn filtered into teaching, manufacturing, retailing, and many other aspects of life in Ireland and beyond. Ireland moved to a new era, and today, students from the now several university design courses available are winning awards and recognition worldwide and working at the cutting edge of development in global companies. Now, Muriel Gann was born in 1897, long before the establishment of Kilkenny Design, in Donegal, the northwest tip of Ireland. With her circle of friends, she set up in 1930 what was at the beginning known as a depot in Dublin for Irish country handmade items, including homespun, knitting, and lumber rugs. Miss Gann, as she was known to us all, was so moved by the scant appreciation given to the skilled makers who worked and lived in rural Ireland, in those days often in poverty, that she was determined to foster appreciation of their work and provide a source of income. Now, the story of her life is beautifully and often amusingly told in her biography, Deeds, Not Words, by Geraldine Mitchell. The title, her oft-repeated saying, governed her life, deeds, not words. Of Muriel's first visit to the Aran Islands in 1931, her biographer says, "It would be difficult to exaggerate the importance of this first visit to the islands. They lie 20 miles out in the Atlantic off the Clare-Galway coast. This trip was to have far-reaching effects for the people of the islands and the image of Irish crafts abroad. She was the first person ever to offer Aran women money for their knitting, or more precisely, for the patterned jerseys that they knitted. She was the first to create an outlet and a market for their work in the country shop, which the depot had become, on Dublin's fashionable Stephen's Green. Her intuitive response to the exceptional creative skills of the Inishmore women she met on that first trip, many of whom, to this day, knit from pictures in their heads and not patterns, illustrates how she was acting out of her stated belief that tradition is not just resting on the past, but is ever starting afresh and moving onwards. This belief, I suggest, is as relevant in the nurturing of design talent today as it was to giving visibility to those Aran knitters in the early 1930s. It's interesting to note that Muriel Gann's first visit to Aran took place some years before Robert J. Flaherty's legendary film Man of Aran was made, which brought the culture of the islands to the attention of an international audience. Now, I first worked with Muriel Gann when we became founder members of the Crafts Council of Ireland, under the auspices of the Royal Dublin Society. Muriel Gann brought together organisations, rural, traditional, educational, semi-state bodies, and Kilkenny design workshops, which was the new kid on the block at the time. And in 1971, the Crafts Council of Ireland was formed. Today, That organisation is the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, and one of its major activities is an international craft fair called Showcase, held every year in January in the Royal Dublin Society. Buyers from Ireland and all over the world are able to view the work of young, innovative designers, as well as view the latest designs and creations from established participants. The most recent figures show that orders of over 20 million euros were placed at Showcase. So now there's a question. Where does the responsibility for valuing and sharing unique cultures and fostering design talent lie? I would suggest squarely with teachers and trainers who, like the heroes of old, are largely unwept, unhonoured, and unsung. As His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, said in his introduction to the book Fitness for What Purpose, published in 2018 to mark the 40th anniversary of the Sir Misha Black Medal, the contributions of individuals to the teaching of design at all levels are not adequately valued. They have demonstrated through their examples how design can create value out of technology, how design can energize industry, and how design can be a satisfying career. Misha Black was appointed the first Professor of Industrial Design at the Royal College of Art in 1959 and held that position until his retirement in 1975. He was deeply involved with national and international design organizations, and when he died in 1977, the heads of the organizations to which he had given so much chose to honor his memory by honoring those who, like him, had given distinguished services to design education. It's the only award for design educators, the only award of any kind promoted jointly and collaboratively by distinguished and venerable royal and other design and engineering bodies in the UK, and is truly international. In addition, in 1998, the Award for Innovation in Design Education was established, and this marks the achievements of individuals in mid-career or institutions in the United Kingdom and covers all disciplines: technology, interaction, management, and of course, craft. Now, the book, Fitness for What Purpose? The title comes from an essay by Misha Black, contains reprints of his writings and contributions by recipients of the medal and award. It's not only a record of the finest teachers and institutions in design education from countries as far apart as India, Japan, Chile, Europe, and the United States, but an insight into the place of design education in diverse cultures today and, importantly, tomorrow. Now, as co-editor, I risk of being accused, as Disraeli once opined, that the author who speaks about their own books is almost as bad as a mother who speaks about her own children. However, I honestly believe that anyone interested in sharing culture by design will find the views of such a distinguished and disparate international list of contributors really worth reading. So in summary, I'd suggest that talent and creativity can blossom at any age, at any time in life, given the right conditions. Now, these conditions and circumstances are changing at more rapid pace than ever before. It's reckoned that up to 40 or even 50% of today's graduates, those in their early 20s, in any field, are likely to end their careers working in jobs that have not yet been invented. From an early age, we need to encourage our children to value, preserve, and draw on their particular cultural heritage, while allowing their minds to be open to the widest possibilities and to be creative in their outlook. Certainly, I believe that we need to foster team play and collaborative work, because designers are now, and will even more so in the future, be part of a team made up of experts in artificial intelligence, technology, engineering, social, and special skills. These teams will be called upon to design not just single objects, but systems and services, to design ways to deliver everything from healthcare programs, transportation networks, to design how cities may run more smoothly and how governments may govern. We need people and teachers with vision and courage who understand the value of diverse cultures to continually and constantly challenge the status quo and to look to the future as creative, inventive, visionary leaders to solve the problems our world is facing today. And goodness knows, they are many and changing. Seamus Heaney, the Nobel laureate, said that creativity is about impulse discovering direction, about potential discovering structure, about chance becoming intention. He also wrote, "Hope is not optimism, which expects things to turn out well, but rooted in a conviction that there is good worth working for." What a phrase to hold on to when individuals and leaders of countries veer towards isolationism and the challenges of uniting people while respecting and treasuring contrasting cultures seems overwhelming. Thank you all for listening.
Mary, thank you so much. I'm sure, like everyone here, I have so many questions, but knock out, and I just want to say it's Q&As afterwards, so save them up. I love to hear your thoughts. Phenomenal. I'm just moved and reminded and affirmed and just how exciting for us all to hear those words of wisdom. I am going to say that with Emma not being here, I get a chance to say some extra things from the podium, which I'm excited about. I'm reminded of a wonderful sculptor, Edinburgh sculptor, Jake Harvey, who I was speaking with, and we mentioned the physical and not losing the physical in the face of the digital. Jake he was talking about how he transfers his knowledge base and his passion. He grabbed my hand and said, "This is how I do it." With his apprentices, he takes their hand and sculpts, hammers their hand. It's about the physical knowledge that we can pass on, and a call to teachers there, which was just heartening. And we have undermined that sector, and it's an important one to value and to respect. So I'm going to take you on a journey in design myself. We've got 3, and here's the first one. Come with me this side of the room. We set out 3 or 4 really important stands tonight. This is a little hint of what journeys in design are up to next. We have an exhibition called Salvage Scotland, a Maritime SOS. Thanks, Jenny. A Maritime SOS, where the seas are a great resource. But you know what? We're over-plundering and we're polluting. Magical co-design is helping us protect our coasts and our seas. And we have an exhibition coming up linking from the mainland to Scottish Islands to more distant shores. Details if you sign up to the Journeys in Design newsletter. And we've also got a wonderful exhibition which is going to roll over 3 years. Our linen stories is the first of our Material World series, and the next moving, contrastingly, to concrete with an exhibition called Concrete Designs to Thrive. Starting this year, rolling over 3 years, we're going to talk walks of life, and we're using walks of life to theme our approach to how we build structures for living well. More details soon. Sustainability. I'm delighted that with Mary's wonderful book, we have a Journeys in Design library that is a lending library. It's held at my home at the moment, but we're looking for a home for that library. Tonight in the audience we have Professor Jane McCann, a recipient of a Misha Black Award. Jane, would you like to stand up? I'd like to introduce Jane McCann. Jane... Jane's a pioneering design educator with a foot in China, a foot in England, and more than a foot at home in Donaghadee. But in Northern Ireland, Jane has been a leading light, both in the Biennale I mentioned, bringing together a fabulous conference, and also in the Invest Northern Ireland Natural Fibre Composites Collaborative Network. This is their latest publication. I'm leaving it here with Mary's book, with the book that Mary co-edited, for you to have a look at. And the final word just for now on sustainability is and something I've become to consider an icon of our linen stories, and that's Linen Millie. When I grew up in Lisburn in Northern Ireland, the word Millie was quite pejorative. It was those dirty women that worked in the factories. These women were hardworking, multitasking, and super skilled. Learning that and being introduced by Jane to a wonderful designer called Sue Shields, we've developed a tea towel in honour of Linen Millie. And we've had a wonderful experience in asking for volunteers, 10 in Scotland and 10 in Northern Ireland, to cut out that pattern. You can wash your dishes or you can cut it out and make a doll. And 10 women from both regions have beautifully, individually embroidered 20 Linen Millies. They're in the exhibition upstairs. It's stunning work, and it's about collaboration and joining two regions together in a heritage story with some contemporary design. That's this little journey. Another one coming up soon. Mark Watson. I'm glad there's another Y chromosome with me here on the platform, Mark. He told me not to over-egg the pudding. In my research, I had the joy of digging into lots of archives, including the Historic Environment Scotland Archive, a stunning national network available to everyone who has an interest. I recommend it. I came across the work of great people like John Hume, who photographed factory buildings all over Scotland in the 70s and left a fantastic legacy for everyone. And I'm going, well, he won't like me for saying this, but I've got another great Scot beside me here. He is our nation's repository of knowledge on factory buildings, the heritage of factory buildings, and has a foot in Europe through industrial heritage as well. My object for Mark is a photograph. And I just want to note how important photography and journalism is in the ecology of design as well. This is a photograph gifted to our linen stories of Millies working in Kirkcaldy. It's an amazing salvaged archive which we're going to present to Historic Environment Scotland when our linen stories is over. So this photograph of women in one of the factories that you actually have, its stocks is in Kirkcaldy, and you've written well about it. Welcome, Mark Watson.
Thank you very much, John. And in case anyone was wondering, John Hume is still alive, so his legacy is continuing to grow, I'm happy to say. So I'm going to talk about factory design, design in factories and design of factories. And where are the influences coming from? And quite a lot of them are from Europe, and then there are also ideas going to Europe and coming back again. And I may mention some names, so here they are written down. Carl Friedrich Schinkel is probably the greatest architect of the 19th century, certainly the first half of the 19th century in Prussia, which is now Germany. And he was not only an architect of buildings, but was also a designer of things. And I'll come to that in just a minute. In a similar way, Alexander Greek Thomson, notice the middle name Greek, applied to him. So he was absorbing influences from abroad without ever having gone there. And that is bottom left in the image here. The Egyptian chambers, which draw from all sorts of exotic Middle Eastern sources. It's been behind scaffolding for several years now. But it's hoped that now that it's on the Europa Nostra short list of buildings that are most in danger in Europe for this year, that something will be done about it. But in a similar way to Schinkel, Greek Thomson also designed things, and particularly iron things. So here we have a sewer ventilator in the middle, in red, in London, which was used to ventilate the gents. And the fumes are expelled above head height. But that is an Alexander Greek Thomson design. So an architect was providing designs for Walter Macfarlane and Company of Saracen Ironworks in Glasgow. And another designer, quite well known in design circles, is Peter Behrens, a professor who started off as a painter an artist who was never actually properly an architect, but he worked with others on buildings and also on the design of products, especially those of AEG, or AEG, I might pronounce it, such as that electric kettle. So I'll be featuring all of these in the talk to come. Here are a couple of factories in Glasgow which take inspiration from Europe. So can anybody name either of the ones that they see? I heard a mutter of Templeton's, which is correct, the carpet factory on Glasgow Green. And what is it modelled on? The Doge's Palace in Venice, it is often said, although if you look at the details, in fact, quite a lot of liberties have been taken. And in fact, William Leeper, who designed this in 1889, took it further forward, and he was now able to apply much brighter colours than the now rather sun-faded colours that exist in Venice. And he rearranged things somewhat in order to make it suit a carpet factory. Unfortunately, the factory did fall down during its construction onto a weaving shed, killing some 20 weavers who were immediately behind that building. But the building itself is, I think, a much cherished landmark in Glasgow, and following a quite pioneering redevelopment of that building in the early 1980s, with funds from the SDA and others, it has a continued life. So, as we say nowadays, the greenest building is the one already built. You don't have to build new buildings, perhaps. How does Italian design also impact upon in what you might think of as rather mundane functional buildings? And I'm going to argue, in fact, that the Templeton's factory that we saw is a functional building. It is a magnificent advertisement for Axminster carpets and the colours that you can find in them. But there are also other practical ways that established Italian architecture, such as the campaniles that are built at churches, can be adapted in order to make a Victorian factory more fitting. But obviously most factory chimneys are very functional, but these ones do owe something to Italian campaniles. The first of these to have been built is Cox's Stack in Lochee, in my own town of Dundee, and that's the brick one in the middle, Camperdown Works, which was a jute mill. Well, in fact, it was originally the Camperdown Linen and Hemp Works, so this is a linen story. And next to that, two imitators in England, in Lancashire, the India Mill in Darwin, and then Lister's Mill in Bradford, which is probably the most famous of these campanile chimneys, but the later and smaller of the examples I'm showing. And Lister's was a silk mill. And it's also possible to utilize the Italian campanile form for other functional things, such as hydraulic accumulators used to work cranes and dock entrances and to pump out dry docks, especially in docklands. So bottom left, fairly dark picture is in Leith, and it's what's now the Fourth Port's offices, which are used for administering the Leith docks as opposed to the other port operations which Fourth Ports use. And to the left of that is the small crane, the surviving crane built by William Armstrong of Newcastle, a hydraulic crane. And the pressure that is accumulated in these towers by using a heavy weight to push down on it is then squeezed in pipes to wherever it's needed within the dock. And it's also used to make lifts go up and down. So top left we have Queen's Dock in Glasgow, and that building is now a distillery. And in the middle, Prince's Dock, also in Glasgow on the south side, the biggest of the accumulator towers in Glasgow. Again, repeating Italian style. Very often the Victorians are criticised for using architecture that they borrow from other ages and other places. But I think many of us now enjoy Victorian architecture for that very reason. And on the bottom right is the tallest of the accumulator towers in the UK, which is in Grimsby. It was one of the earlier ones when it simply used the weight of water to power things in that dock. It was then realised soon after this huge campanile was built, which dominates Lincolnshire, that it wasn't necessary to build them quite so tall as that. And in fact, if you put some heavy weights in, iron or lead, then that will do the job more effectively. But Italian campaniles and towers also feature in other industrial architecture. This is another linen story because it's Baxter's Linen Works in Dundee, which was the largest in the world, arguably at one time when they overtook Marshall's and before the Northern Irish industry really expanded in a big industrial scale. So Baxter's produced sailcloth, tarpaulins, and things like that from linen. And in 1866, Bell Mill, or what is now the Indigo Hotel, again adaptive reuse after many years of dereliction, but now it's a really smart hotel, has on the top of it this campanile tower, a bell tower, and it appears to be an exactly modelled on the Santa Maria della Salute in Venice by Baldassare Langena from the end of the 16th century. It doesn't say in any of the records in Dundee that is where the idea came from. So it was only when I was in Venice I thought, isn't that Lower Dens? That I realised that these things were more taken quite literally. They're not necessarily an adapted sort of vaguely Italianate design. There's an exact copy. And Baxter's had as a manager Peter Carmichael, whose brother James Carmichael ran a mill in France. And in Ailly-sur-Somme, there is a rather more modest bell tower here in a factory that's now empty. And latterly it was spinning jute and weaving jute, which is a type of linen, arguably. And the correspondence between the two businesses which were on friendly terms, and some of the workforce, including women who had experience in the industry in Scotland, some from Arbroath, some from Dundee, were taken to, or encouraged to migrate, should I say. They were not the expats, they were migrants, but maybe they went back, maybe some of them stayed, and their descendants are still in France. Perhaps some of them got caught up in the Franco-Prussian War because it was occupied in 1870 by the German army. And so there are interesting stories to be told that are in the archives in Dundee University about the parallel lives that these two mills had. And another linen story I can offer is that of John Mabberley MP, who was one of the very few English entrepreneurs who acquired property in Scotland, and particularly textile mills. This is Broadford Works in Aberdeen on the left, which is known as Richards for most of its life, but it was John Mabberley who acquired it. And so there's a Mabberley Street in Aberdeen, and why is there also a Rue Mabberley in Amiens in Picardy? Because John Mabberley did a runner. He was the disappearing MP. It sometimes happens. He vanished. The business wasn't going to pay any more debts pay any of its debts because Mabberley had disappeared. Sometime later, he reappeared as a correspondent for the Times in Madrid, where he fought a duel. And then he tried to set up a business in Paris. He defrauded an aristocrat there, and who then came to the UK to try and find him. Then he pops up in Amiens, but because many people in Europe had the impression that if somebody's come from Britain, they must know all the latest technology, they can organise things. So he was given leeway to set up a new factory in Amiens, which he did, evading various rules that were set up to try and prevent the export of British machinery. How do you do that? Then you set up a factory in France to make the machinery. So that way you get round any of this, the British tariff, British-French tariff issues that existed in the 1840s. And accordingly, Maberley won a medal for his business won a medal, and here is his factory. So there are these connections that can be made, and the link is through linen. Here's another one. We're looking at a hard border between Europe and Russia, where security guards patrol over what had been waterfalls. But this textile mill here is a flax mill that was built by William Fairbairn. He designed it, who was born in Kelso. And it was managed by Scots from Dundee, who got caught up in the Russian Civil War. So there's interesting stories to be told about what was going on then. Oh no, the whites are coming, what do we do about this? No, the reds are coming, the whites were on their side. And now this is the border between Estonia and Russia. So in Evangorod, across the water from Narva, are these flax mills, becoming a bit derelict now, but there is a definite Scottish connection. And there's also a Scottish connection which is acknowledged in Finland, in Tampere, to James Finlayson, who was born in Pennycook. And this plaque was sent from Tampere to Edinburgh. And in fact, he returned to Edinburgh in poverty, but the name Finlayson still remains over the textile mills today, where now there are 7 museums and a whole lot of other businesses active. But it wasn't always one way. Some ideas and technology came back from, in this case, Sweden to Scotland. So here we have the Luma light factory making lamps, light bulbs in Stockholm. And this is the Swedish Luma lamp factory in Govan, as it was and as it now is. Now that the Linthouse Housing Association has renovated it. So this raises all sorts of questions about what makes an industry national. What could be more national than the Gare du Nord in France? Well, actually, if you look at the detail of the columns here, it says Alston and Gourlay, Glasgow, 1862. So this is the yard in Glasgow where these very fancy French-looking columns were cast. And on the other hand, if you look at fountains in Dumfries and in Paisley, this has been renovated, that one not so well, you see these small boys wielding crocodiles. And here are some more, but they're for sale, and one of them's in Spain and another one is in the south of France. Can they really all have been by the Sun Foundry of Glasgow? Or, as it's argued here by the French experts, did the Glaswegians pinch the design? And because I don't think Glasgow had schools for training people in Beaux-Arts design to the same extent as in France. So I think in this case, actually, they got hold of a French fountain and thought, right, we'll start making our own. My show and tell object is this heavy iron plate, of which there are a great number in Falkirk museums, because they were used as a sort of final completion test by Carron Ironworks, the iron founders in Carron Ironworks. So they each were asked to make one of these as a proof of their ability to make castings. So there are quite a lot of these to be found in junk shops and car boot sales in Scotland. So I got that in Coburn Street in Edinburgh. But you also see very fine quality ones up for sale, which are attributed to the Buderus Ironworks in Prussia, and some also to the Coalbrookdale Company in Shropshire in England. And I think the reason for that is partly, and these are my pictures from a shop in Berlin, so a plate very similar to the one I just showed that was gold as Coalbrookdale is here considered to be designed by Carl Friedrich Schinkel, who designed a lot of things for iron production in Prussia. And this stems from the Napoleonic Wars, when Prussia had had the shock of the Battle of Jena, Austerlitz, defeat by France, and everybody had to patriotically rally round. For example, women would have jewellery made of iron instead of anything more precious. And now these jewels are quite expensive. Certainly I couldn't afford them. Or you could buy a plate like that nowadays in Russia. So I think these designs are migrating. So this is the Kasley Ironworks in the Urals, is also making plates, not quite as fine quality, I think, as this one. The V&A Museum has recognized that their Coalbrookdale plate is actually designed by Schinkel. And this is a bridge designed by Schinkel, which has tritons and hippocampi. And here's a hippocampus, and there's a triton. So I think this is a favorite motif of Schinkel, reproduced on his bridges and in his plates. Now Schinkel, I'm going to go way over the time now, but I think I've even given a couple more minutes. Schinkel came to Scotland and indeed to Britain on a tour with the president of the Board of Trade of Prussia to see all the latest advances that were happening, especially in British industry. So here, these are two sketches which he did in Edinburgh. One's familiar, probably, St Giles Cathedral, Old Town, and the other is Tanfield Gasworks in the bottom of Dundas Street, Cannon Mills, Broughton Street, that sort of area, where it was the only big hall which was big enough to hold the disruption of 1843. So that building has disappeared, but Schinkel thought it was particularly valuable to note its construction details. And he also went to notice cotton mills in Manchester, which are these, and in the southwest of England, Stanley Mill near Stroud, which is this here. Notice I've put this picture up twice because one has a small discrete square over the archive stamp, and that little square there is because the other stamp applied to many of Schinkel's drawings is a swastika and an eagle. Now, when Schinkel came back, he was not only working on the new designs for his Bow Academy, but also setting up royal factories, and this is one of them. It's now been demolished. It was demolished in 2014, but this was a flax mill in the southwest of what's now Poland, but it was Prussia. And it has the same sort of, but actually perhaps more complicated iron constructional details. And I shall stop there before I go way over time. But I think there are a lot of connections to be made, and if you say, oh, we've got one of those, as with those plates, and they turn up in Russia and Prussia and England and Scotland, then ideas are clearly migrating, but maybe we hadn't yet got the copywriting of designs secured across Europe in the way that we can do nowadays. So that what I was going to go on to is John Baildon, born Larbert, Scotia, born in Scotland, and he set up the first ironworks that smelted iron with coke in Prussia, now in Poland. But I'll stop at that point, and we'll extract ourselves from that particular.
Mark Watson, thank you very much, Mark. Again, so many questions, so many routes of design. If anyone has stories of their own and they would like to share them with Mark or with myself or any of the panel, we'd love to hear them. I'm going to take you, that's my cue, to take you this side of the room for a journey in design about internationalism. Thrilled tonight to have 12 panels from the Scottish Diaspora Tapestry. This is an amazing project which has developed over the last number of years. It's now closed, but it celebrates Scots abroad. And it has it lets me give cue to a wonderful collaborator of the last year. Two people I'm going to mention here, Ben Hanjek and Jenny Bruce. Would you like to stand up? Jenny Bruce. And where's Ben? Ben? There he is, brilliant. So Ben's been introduced to me by Jenny, has been a fantastic archivist of our linen stories and also works at Artiscience Library, where we've been having our wellbeing wild weaving workshops more anon. But this amazing panel, Jenny, in fact, who'd be happy to chat later, has taken many of these panels around the world. We've featured here, and we've been granted permission by the group to feature key European panels that have resonance for our own linen stories. Right in the middle, we've got, it's extraordinary. I mean, the detailer is brilliant. The conservator of Scottish privileges. Before we were in union with another country, Scotland was granted special privileges to the continent. Holland, the first great trading nation, granted us a staple port in Veer. And this panel represents the Veer. And here we can see what we sent them: wool, salmon, butter, leather, coal and hides. And this is what we got back: some fine linen and pan tiles. If you know the East Nook of Fife, or if you know Fife and the coast, you'll know that you'll see some pan tiles. And this is the panel from Curos and Bruce of Carnock there, and there's some Baltic pine in there. This is the Mills Around the World panel, and we've got Russia, Spain, Germany and others featured there. And this is for our Old Alliance. I like the reference to Amiens. Here's another linen story. Amiens is the site of the Jules Verne University of Picardy. And anyone who knows Edinburgh and the Broughton area will know of Picardy Place. The first linen story that we tell is of the Huguenots, the great craftspeople that were chased out of France and arrived in other sympathetic countries, including 12 families who were housed in Picardy Village at the Tot of Broughton Place. And I happen to know there's a local expert in Mary. I see you here. And Margaret, great to see you. Margaret is something of a local expert on the Huguenots in Picardy, and I really look forward to speaking to you later on. But the Old Alliance is alive and well today. This is the diaspora panel. Beautiful pieces. Do please have a look at them afterwards. Elizabeth Shaw on the linen trade, the different trade routes. This is a panel to that. In 2014, Journeys Design presented India Street, looking at the Turkey red dye industry, a co-production with the British Council. And here we have my hometown, Lisburn. Steve, you'll know this one. This is John Barber was a Paisley weaver. His son, William Barber, set up Barber Threads in Lisburn, the biggest linen thread manufacturer in the world. Factories also in Glasgow. So that's a panel to there. Fantastic to have these panels. Jenny, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you, Jenny. The last break for me will be about well-being, but I'm going to nip back here to talk about other bits of internationalism which Journeys in Design tries to foster. And just to encourage you to take a little look at this. This is the leaflet from Texture magazine, Texture Museum in Kortrijk in Belgium. 85% of the world's tall flax for linen is grown in a broad band between northern France, including Picardy, through Belgium, Flanders, into Holland as far as Amsterdam. We've been wonderfully lucky to meet the curators and the team at Texture Museum in Kortrijk. Pick up a leaflet. There's a street in Kortrijk called Belfaststrasse, and one called, no, that's the wrong accent, and one referring to Dundee. I met with a 91-year-old who was head of the 1950 Flax Board, which was the commodities market, the world commodities market in flax. And he said, I remember the accents. The Irish liked to drink, but the Scots drove a canny bargain. Our third speaker, Stacey Hunter. Stacey's known for a lot of really intense design work as a curator and an organizer, and most notably, I think, for Local Heroes, a curatorial program, which I'll let Stacey talk about herself. But it's this object that I'm going to show you. This is the Skinny. And the Skinny is a cultural listings magazine in Scotland. It's fantastic. And this is February 2018. Now, we launched our linen stories in May 2018, and I was looking for Scottish designers who represented different stories, including ones of international collaboration. This is a picture of the Bright Spot bag, which is up in our Linen Stories exhibition, and I thought first, in Stacey's column, I saw it first in Stacey's column, which she writes regularly for The Skinny. Stacey Hunter.
So, design as a cultural export. I'm Dr. Stacey Hunter, and as John said, I'm a design curator. And I founded Local Heroes in 2015 to find exciting ways to bring contemporary Scottish design to new audiences. And I think it's maybe useful to begin by defining specifically what I mean when I talk about design culture. So, Scandinavian design. I haven't used a picture here because I think that as soon as you read Scandinavian design, you all immediately conjured up an image very clearly in your head, maybe with a soft naturalistic colour palette and some of the other things that we associate with Nordic and Scandi design, pale birchwood and flashes of copper and gold. Does that sound about right, the image people have? And that's the power of design culture in a nutshell, really. How in an aesthetic sense, it can leave a very distinct imprint. Now, hands up if you've heard of the cultural phenomenon of hygge. Yeah. So, it's a phenomenon, a culture of design that's both understood as being deeply rooted in nature and with a feeling of coziness. But more importantly, I think it also brings to mind a more democratic, egalitarian type of design that's very firmly linked to ideas about quality of life. Craftsmanship and accessibility come together, so humble can meet high end in a mix of vintage ceramics, natural fabrics, and modern glass. So in this way, a society's cultural values are reflected through the medium of designed objects and spaces. And you're left with a sense of a people and a place, even if you've never visited or met them. Another country that has a strong cultural identity is Japan. And Japanese design, according to Kenya Hara, is characterized by these four aspects: sensai, delicacy; chimitsu, meticulousness; tainai, thoroughness or attention to detail; and kanketsu, simplicity. And this photograph is one that I took about this time last year at an open-air antique market in the middle of Tokyo. And I just thought it just sort of blew me away, the care and consideration that people put into curating these displays and the relationships that they made with the objects that they were putting out. And I thought that they really helped to articulate Kenya Hara's characteristics. And so thinking about it in this way, where design culture is a set of characteristics as opposed to an aesthetic, is really interesting to me. And for some time, I had been thinking about Scottish design and what our characteristics might be. I'd asked myself, what's our design aesthetic? We all know about the heritage-led aspects that are synonymous now with Scottish design, like tweed and tartan and cashmere, and thanks to John Lennon. But what is our contemporary design language? This identification of or defining is something Local Heroes has been mapping through exhibitions, events, and research. And 5 years ago, as a curator, I hadn't thought of the term design as a cultural export, but with projects like Local Heroes at Edinburgh Airport and Made in Glasgow, where we reimagined and commissioned the new souvenirs, that is really what we were constructing a platform for. And these high-quality items celebrated and helped define Scotland's design landscape for visitors during Scotland's Year of Innovation, Architecture and Design in 2016 and the 2018 European Championships. They provided a much-needed snapshot of what Scottish design culture looked like and how it talked about itself at a particular point in time. And so this has come up already, thanks to John. So yeah, we've begun, so this GIF shows some of the Skinny articles that we've begun this process of mapping how diverse and distinctive our contemporary design culture is. So this is around 2 years' worth of articles about contemporary Scottish design for the Skinny. And it gives you, hopefully, a sense of the scope and the aesthetic of contemporary output within the context of product design and craft here. And it's great that we've been able to shine a light on some of the people who are producing exceptional work. But this story could be disseminated so much more widely. And if Scottish designers are at a commercial disadvantage due to their geographic distance from major design centres in Europe, we should consider how to position their work in the right places at the right time and in a modern, high-quality format. Now, what has surprised me, and what I won't argue against, is that there is not an overall unifying aesthetic that very neatly says this is contemporary Scottish design. And what I've learned from my journey so far is that our story, our collective values as translated by our design community, is not simply a style or an aesthetic. What it is an attitude, a confidence and an eclecticism. It's our growing plurality and diversity. It's our inventiveness and ingenuity and willingness to collaborate with one another inside of Scotland, the UK and internationally. But the question remains, how do you make that into a cultural export like hygge, or Italian furniture design, or Dutch jewellery design, or French fashion? Well, I believe that you do this with storytelling. It's time for Scotland to take its place in the world as a design nation. We need to begin to think of and talk about ourselves as a design nation now. And you know, I always think that you have to visualise something really and sort of work back. I visualise the front cover of a magazine like Time, and the headline is how one small country made design the key to success. And it's maybe 10 years from now. So working back from that, we need to capitalise on our strengths now. We have nearly all of the assets, infrastructure and networks that a country needs to be a design nation, even a comparably sized one like Finland with a population of 5.5 million. So we've got the design skills that are the envy of many countries in the world. We've got the designers, and we've got some of the highest quality manufacturing. So some specificity now, that's really important. Specifically, what is the new story about Scottish design that we need to tell? And this is the story that we need our government, our tourist board and our enterprise agencies to understand and to help tell also. And that is that we're experiencing a golden age of design, a renaissance, or whatever label you want, but it's happening now, and we can't let it slip through our fingers. We punch well above our weight. If you need proof, the 2019 Loewe Craft Prize, which gives €50,000 to the winner, so that's like the Turner Prize, if you like, of design. Well, 2 of the 29 finalists in 2019 are practicing in Scotland, and one of those got an honourable mention too. So Scotland is part of an international conversation about design. We're known for our quality of design ideas, materials, processes and manufacturing. And we do have a very supportive network facilitated in part by organisations like Journeys in Design, the Dovecot and many others. And we are, as a design community, excellent collaborators. And if design culture means making your values manifest through designed objects and spaces, in Scotland we're increasingly becoming known as a modern country that is pro-Europe, a place where the values of fairness, equality, respect and optimism underpin our society and its hopes for the future. At Local Heroes, we use experimental formats and events to tell stories about our country's design culture. We lionise and champion designers. But what we need now is a long-term plan to export that story. What I believe we must do is have a strong presence at international design events from now until 2030. We don't have to be the biggest or the most expensive, but we do have to be really bloody good. We need to consistently present an intellectually rigorous and high-quality exhibition every year, whether it's at the Milan Mobile, Dutch Design Week, or the London Design Fair. I see this as a 10-year campaign to establish ourselves as a design nation. This will ensure that editors, curators, publishers, buyers around the world expect to see and associate Scotland with design. And by extension, where our culture is now, not a historicised version. So to the future. Just going to take a little drink of water. Thanks. Scottish climate leadership paved the way for the UK's net zero commitment, and this year Glasgow will host the United Nations Summit on Climate Change, known as COP26. We have applied to Creative Scotland, fingers crossed, for funding to create a very ambitious installation which will consider the key themes of COP26. In fact, I'm proud to tell you tonight that we've been invited to premiere this at the London Design Biennale in September, which has been described by a BBC correspondent as a United Nations of Design. If we secure funding, our installation will be Scotland's pavilion during London Design Week and return to Scotland in November for COP26 before touring. We see this as an opportunity to kick off our ambition for a 10-year international campaign, as I've just outlined, with a meaningful and high-profile project that will capture people's imagination and inspire them to see design as a transformational force for good, as well as a mode of cultural production. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll support us on this mission. I've brought copies of the Local Heroes newspaper here, which you're most welcome to take home with you tonight, and there's details in there about how you can stay in touch. So thanks for your attention, and to John for inviting me.
Question time. I'm going to start the ball rolling. And I mean, I've got far too many questions, but let's give this one up across the panel. And it's a simple question in some ways. Across the board, what happens if we don't do anything? Stacey.
I think the risk is, and it's a shame that Ben isn't still here, didn't hear that presentation, because I think it's really important to try and impress upon people that have got the power to help with this sort of thing that it's time limited, and the risk is that if we don't grab this opportunity, then it will be lost. So I think the danger is if that we don't do anything, that we'll lose designers in Scotland to other places, and we'll fail to benefit as a society from the contribution that designers make.
Well, I'd just like to endorse the call to arms that we heard from Stacey. Although I think maybe the idea of a designer trained in Scotland going elsewhere isn't necessarily all bad. They might come back again, or if they don't, then they may still be able to put what they've learnt to good use elsewhere, and I think that's not necessarily going to be to Scotland's disadvantage.
Well, I was told once that nothing stands still. You either go backwards or you go forwards. So if you do nothing, the chances are you're going to go backwards.
Wise words, wise words. Any comments from the floor on that one?
As somebody who has no real connection with the design world, one of the things that is going through my mind as everybody's been speaking is, what actually is the wider benefit of having productive, innovative design in Scotland beyond those who are involved in the design industry, if we can call it that?
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that one. I didn't come from a design background. My concern is that we have a country that is receptive to the more vulnerable, and that is a country I can feel good about being here. One of the things I've learned in working with designers and artists is the incredible, it's the result of that training that gives people a capacity to think laterally, broadly, strategically, in a way that me, from a bioscientific background, had to relearn in that creative field. And I think the contribution is much, much broader than the design of services and products and whatever. I think there is a mindset that designers and artists bring to how we live, which is remarkable, to be cherished, and is way beyond those. I mean, we're not speaking to ourselves, we're speaking to everyone in the country.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, if young people's minds are trained to approach things with a design background or a process which allows you to analyze and find solutions to a particular problem. They don't look just at the color or the shape. They look at the context in which that is going to be sold or bought or used. And I think design can play such a huge part in medicine, in helping people who are to deliver medical systems, how we receive them. If you think of any hospitals, the last recipient of the Misha Black Medal was Professor Clarkson from Cambridge University, and he's looking at the delivery of health programs, and that was extraordinary. His background is design engineering, and to listen to what he had to say about how you could save money, make the experience better, quicker, and more acceptable for everyone. So I think design can help all our lives. If you look at transport, if you look at any other major thing, how governments work, how offices work, I think shops, everything. There isn't a time that I'm sure any one of you stand in an organization and wait and say, I wish there was a bit of common sense and design here and something could happen better. And I think design training can help to make life better, make well-being.
I think design engineering is about understanding how things are made and then maybe making them better.
I could just listen to Mary. I'd rather just hear more of what she's got to say on the subject, really. But to put it, to put it into a slightly different context. I mean, when I was researching into the town planning of some of the newer Scottish towns, I was really surprised to discover that you have whole planning departments in this country who don't have a single person in the office with a design qualification. And I think that's all I need to say. I mean, that just explains a lot, doesn't it, about why things might not work the way that they ought to.
Thank you, Mary. Simon, did I see your hand up there? Thank you. Simon Watley.
Yeah, I'm from the Scottish Furniture Makers Association and got a background in architecture and design. And just as an example, perhaps, of how design can improve life exponentially, really, for people would be, I would suggest to take a look at the Maggie's Centres, which are the result of one person's journey from getting a cancer diagnosis and a determination that other people shouldn't have to go through what she went through. She was obviously, I think a garden designer and historian. Her husband was an architecture critic. Their friends were architects, so they understood that architecture could actually transform people's lives. So they set about developing a brief for a new building that would promote well-being, that would be the antithesis to the typical oncological unit. So a domestic interior that's kind of soft, welcoming, non-threatening. And they've the Maggie's Centres charities demonstrated for more than 2 decades now that they're onto something really, really special. And in the Edinburgh Centre alone, I think they get something like 20,000 people visiting a year and deriving great benefit from that, because of the design, the quality of the design, the architecture, the light in the spaces, the openness. They have secluded spaces where you can have private conversations with advisors and experts, and then they have spaces where groups can do Tai Chi relaxation sessions, all these other things, and then there's beautiful gardens as well. So it's all about finding a whole plethora of responses to
Absolutely.
help
It's
improve
that
life.
holistic, yeah, absolutely. Life in its holistic sense. Lovely to see some other familiar faces here. Anne-Marie Slito, very lovely to see you. Carolyn, Helena, good stuff. Questions from the floor? Oh, we've got another. Here we go. Thanks. There's a wee mic beside you.
Oh, right, sorry. I'm Andrew Crummy. I'm the designer of that tapestry over there.
Andrew, forgive me, just a round of applause for this man. We've not met, I've just heard of him. Andrew, thank you for coming.
The thing I wanted to say was the as well as that tapestry, the Great Tapestry of Scotland, and I'm involved with about 20 tapestries altogether. Almost all of them are done on linen, and we get the linen from Peter Greggs in Kirkcaldy.
Oh, shout out for Peter Greggs, yes, excellent.
I think it's worth mentioning it there. If you ever get the chance to go to the sample room there, it's absolutely fabulous. Actually, if you get a tour of it, of the factory as well, it's amazing because it's a sort of step back in time, but it's beautiful linen. The Diaspora tapestry was about 800 plus people stitched onto the linen. The Great Tapestry was about 1,000. There's about 2,000 or 3,000 people involved, plus many others. And I've got two of the stitchers here with me tonight, as well as Jenny. There's Francis and Margaret, and we've brought along, which you asked me to do, John, was we've started a new tapestry, which is a tapestry for Europe, which we've never shown to anybody before.
Very exciting.
So the idea was we were going to put it in the back there, but it didn't quite work out. But we've got it here, so after all this, we'll put it over there.
Fantastic.
And if anybody wants to come and put a stitch in, we're more than happy to do that.
A stitch for Europe. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Fantastic. So look, we get a little criticism after the talk by not providing time for networking. Any other burning questions? Well, look, I'd just like to welcome everyone to have a little cup of tea, a little biscuit, deliberately some stroopwafel and some Scottish shortbread, acknowledging our link to the Netherlands. And a big thank you for coming. Thank you.